Good afternoon. My name is Don Bowman. My company is Agilicus, and today I'm going to talk about securing access to industrial control systems with zero trust. At Agilicus, we enable any user to use any resource from any device, from anywhere, without a VPN. And I'm going to talk specifically about what that word any means with respect to industrial control systems, which are often a little bit underloved. I'm here to say I love them, and we make them work smoothly. So that's what this webinar is all about. I'm hopeful by the end of it, you'll have some questions. I may not have time to get to the questions in the webinar. Feel free to type them in the chat and one of my team members will solve them. Or just email me later, don@agilicus.com, or our general one, info@agilicus.com, and just challenge me. Hey, that's not right. Hey, how would you do that? Hey, how would that work with my yada, yada, yada HMI? So first of all, who am I? My name is Don Bowman. I'm the founder and CEO here at Agilicus, and that's my photo. So we are an all-in-one zero trust network access platform. So what we do is without really any changes to your network, without any reconfiguration of your devices, we allow a user to sign in with their native identity, single sign-on, sign in with Azure, sign in with Google, regardless of who they work for. So that unified authentication means your contractors, your partners, the rest of your team, there's no digitally disadvantaged, disenfranchised folks. They can just get their job done just like anything else, even though it might be a crusty old HMI that was put in 20 years ago. The second is we do very precise fine-grained authorization, those fine-grained rules in audit. And that means that you as the plant owner, you can say, this user can access this thing in this fashion. It's not like a VPN where you're giving them unfettered access to everything. You're giving them access to what they need to get their job done, and you have an audit trail. And really that's what it's all about, end-to-end encrypted, simple, seamless sign-on, verifying everything as you go. So today we're going to talk about really the essence of zero trust. So, zero trust, a big buzzword, been around for a few years now. There's a lot of standards for it. And some people have made it out to be maybe more than it is. Zero trust is three things. Who are you? What are you allowed to do? How do I get you there? So who, what, and how. And that's really how I'm going to talk about is what does that mean for an industrial control system environment? So the first thing we want to talk about is, there's that who. A lot of people think of the who in terms of only their own organization. But what if there's other organizations that have a legitimate need to work with your stuff? It could be the vendor that manufactured it, the John Deere business model. You can't buy this from me unless I can pry into how you use it. It might be somebody that's supporting you. It might be, hey, this is the system integrator that designed it. This is the engineering company that put this together. It could be some troubleshooting you're doing. It could be ongoing daily maintenance, whatever it is. They're an important part of your organization. They just have different identity providers. And if you put yourself in their moccasins, what is their problem? All of their customers are different, and they can't have their customers dictating things like, we use VPN model X with version Y, and we have this identification system and multi-factor system. They want easy. They want to be able to sign as themselves, get their job done, and get out. But really, when it comes down to it, there's quite a number of things on that manufacturing or other industrial floor: the HMI, the PLC, the different SCADA layers, the Internet of Things sensors. There could be cameras overlooking the process control. There's top of rack switches. There's servers and databases and historians. It suddenly has blurred a lot more with IT. There might even be printers there. There might be 900 megahertz radios that are giving access to a remote part of the plant. Every single one of those, somebody has a need to do something on it, but they don't have a need to do something on everything at the same time. So what are the biggest risks that those security vendor or these vendors are posing for you, and how do you implement a vendor access management strategy? So the first one is, and I hear this one a lot, we created the vendor X account. And I'm like, well, how many people work for vendor X? We created the Siemens account. How many people work there? 200,000. Do you think maybe some of them might have left on bad terms in the last couple of days? I don't know. Did you change that password? No, it's been the same way for 10 years. Those shared credentials are a big risk. I'm not saying any one person is dishonest or makes a mistake or something, but it really doesn't help you to be able to say, I couldn't pin my finger on who did that action. You need to be an exact person. The second risk is lateral traversal. So lateral traversal, that's the idea of getting into the network in one spot and walking sideways. So what you want to watch out for here are things that you don't consider super important. One of the sites I was at the other day, they had a big E-size plotter. It was lovely. I'd always wanted one. And it was plugged into the wall with Ethernet and power. But just because of its nature, it also exposed a Wi-Fi hotspot, just in case you needed to print nearby. And it was a type of Wi-Fi hotspot. It wasn't infrastructural in nature. It wasn't really connected. It wasn't, but there was a flaw in the printer, and you could, by going through the Wi-Fi, you could get into the printer and get a shell. And now the shell is on the Ethernet, and the Ethernet is on the same plant floor that has Ethernet IP on it, and that Ethernet IP doesn't have anything, or Modbus, and you're directly there. That lateral traversal, you don't really want your vendors to be able to inadvertently walk sideways through the plant. And then the other one, data breaches and leaks. You might consider, well, this data is not particularly important. Maybe I'm not too worried about it being breached, but there could be something in there that is mission critical, like how many widgets did you make last quarter? Maybe there's a hedge fund that wants to know that information. You might be in a jurisdiction that requires you to disclose, and there's not a lot of oversight. Was their data leaked? Yes. Okay, disclose it. Well, it's really just the tag X, which is recording the temperature of the process. Doesn't matter. You got to disclose it. So really, it is kind of important to understand these risks come in because you've got multiple entities operating inside your system. So what do people need to access? So this is the thing. The more finely you can define this, and it's what and for what reason, when, and for what purpose, without getting in their way and putting a lot of bureaucracy up. You don't want to have, I've got 10 manufacturing lines, they each have these big robot arms. Okay, you're going to update the one on line 1, and they accidentally log into line 2. Line 1's got the safety pins in it, and the line 2 one, they update the firmware and spins around and injure somebody. So you really need to understand this, and in order to do that, you need to have that fine-grained authorization. You can't be, okay, you've got an IP on the plant floor, now just be careful. It needs to be that HMI is this specific one, and you got read-only view to it. So knowing what they're using, you'd be surprised at how broad things can get. It's updating firmware, there's a web interface, there's a remote desktop VNC or RDP that might be to the HMI, it might be directly to some system that's in there supporting it. It could be somebody's working on the next generation of reports for you. It could be a new alarming system. It could be whatever it is. It's a big mesh, and you just cannot integrate to it with a VPN and just give everybody an IP and expect to get something good out of it. A lot of this stuff is intrinsically insecure. So what are the most common challenges for implementing a vendor access? So the first is understanding the risks that happen here. So you've got this goal. Somebody in your organization is walked out in bad terms. Their accounts are terminated instantly. But you've got a vendor that you work with, and that vendor has a big staff. Their HR is not integrated to yours. They're not likely to call you and say this person that you worked with in the past has been fired and caught gambling or something. They have a turnover there. And you're not going to poll them every month and get them to a test. That's why you don't want these shared credentials. If they sign in as Jane at company rather than company shared account, when that company fires Jane is out of your system as well. The vendors often, they either have their own multi-factor, which can't spread into your environment, or they just don't believe in it and you do, or you have a difference of opinion on the importance of it. And you see this when people start to ask inappropriate questions that they think are reasonable. How do I share the multi-factor for this? And somebody says, force your customer to use SMS. Well, why do we use SMS? Oh, because then we have this SMS reflector. Just give them this fake phone number and it goes to all of us at once. And that way anybody can answer the SMS challenge. Well, this is exactly what you're trying to avoid doing. So you really want to have per user multi-factor, per user being a non-shared account. You also may have an issue with privilege controls. Going back to the very basic is read versus read-write, but it could be more than that. It could be, upload firmware, download a file, whatever it is. You want your enforcement mechanism to be more fine-grained than just you're in, be careful. Visibility and auditing. Something bad happens. What's the number one thing people are going to say? What did they get? How long were they in? Where were they? And if you have a visibility and audit trail that shows they went here, they did this, they got this many bytes, and so on, it's going to be much better than, I don't know, I think they were in for about a week. The all or nothing mentality that comes with other remote access technologies like a VPN, you flip that on its head with a zero trust model where every single transaction, I know who you are, I know what you're allowed to do, and I know how I got you there. That really, really helps you enforce your own security and organization policies, which helps you with your compliance 853, 80171, NIST CSF, ISO 27000, whatever poison you've chosen. It helps you with that. You can't really carve it out and say the factory floor doesn't count or the vendors don't count or something like that. It's just not reasonable. So what would you do to minimize vendor risk? How do you implement this vendor access management strategy? So a lot of people will tell you that you spend a lot of money and you do an RFP and you spend a couple of years and you see what you get at the end of it. I'm not a big fan. The company name is Agilicus. My head is cleverly obscuring the logo, and that's all about Agile and Spartacus. Agile is how we do our work. We do a little bit at a time, and we assess requirements. There's a delivery periodically. That's that constant delivery cycle. And then Spartacus, security, the shield with the compass on it, and so on. But I'm a big fan of stepping into things. So when you put together a vendor access management system, you want to be able to get a little bit done and get some value out of that. It could be one vendor. We're going to do all of the GE Emerson PLCs. It could be one area. We're going to do building 9. It could be a layer of the network. We're going to do the historian layer, the HMI layer. But you really need that precise user to resource segmentation. A lot of your networks, it's very difficult to do because they're not subnetted in such a way that they could do with a VPN. So you're trying to do ACLs on a VPN. This user has access to these IP ranges, just breaks. You really need it to be per resource. This user, that resource, this permission, boom. That fine-grained authorization, that multi-factor. Does the user need to present it at least once per session, once per week, once per new device? How often do they need to present it? And that detailed auditing, that's really something that, people are data junkies. You're storing all of those PLC tags in that historian. Why not just have a few audit records for who's been snooping around your network? The traditional VPN approach, so really what happens here is it's really just like having a long Ethernet cable. Any valid user has access to everything at the same time. Now, I know it's not everything. You can have a DMZ and you can have other stuff, but really, people would prefer to have this sort of air gap between, the higher and lower important stuff. The problem is, you could compromise credentials, that lateral traversal, and that air gap becomes kind of porous, and they get into one thing and they walk sideways. So that VPN becomes really just an all or nothing thing. That compromised credential on their desktop, that ransomware, that malware, it's not that great. So all of a sudden, they've gone from, the PLC to your payroll records or vice versa. So when we're out there and talking to folks like yourselves, I ask them, what are you trying to achieve? And there's no real rocket science in this. People want to get their job done faster for less money with more security and less risk. But it comes back to putting yourself in the moccasins of your vendors. Depending which side are you on, are you the operator or the operatee? You really need to be able to have secure connectivity to the thing you need from where you are on the device you need to use. So if you're barreling down the highway in your truck and your customer calls you all panicked and your tablet is beside you and you can pull over safely because you're not going to use it while you're moving, and you can make that mean time to repair thing happen like that, everybody wins. Now, let's do that without compromising security. Let's make it so that that is a convenient and secure activity. Those mission critical systems, we just want to keep increasing the security there. And again, security, I think it's a really good security system with zero trust. Everybody wins. It's simpler to access. It's not like, oh my God, another security system is going to take me 10 hours a week just to sign into stuff. It actually can be simpler. It can be just that single sign-on that you're used to with things like Google Docs. You've signed in once, you're signed into all of them. You're not constantly signing in. Your multi-factor fatigue can drop because you've got one sign-in method. You don't have a different login screen for every device and passwords written on a Post-it note. It's much better. You can improve efficiency and uptime by allowing that vendor access with a single click. So you don't have to be on the phone with them. Like, okay, now I'm going to bring up a port on this. Okay, you can have a remote desktop to this machine that has, it's a jump box. And what's a jump box mean? Can you put somebody on that knows what they're doing? You don't have to worry about that. Just think about, I want to make my reliability higher. I want to make it simpler. I want to make it more secure. And I just want to make it work on any device from anywhere. So our solution, how do we do this with our partners? It's really straightforward. The first is, I think it's a mistake. Anything that says there's a new username or a new password, it's a mistake. Every person has a native natural identity, and it usually flows through their employer. So we use Google's G Suite Workplace here at Agilicus. So all of our sign-ins are the same. You get to a web page and it clicks sign in with Google, and bam, you're there, sign in with Agilicus. And as a consequence, my team members, we don't know our passwords because we don't need to present them all the time. Once we've logged in the browser got it cached and it presents it on the way. And then there's multi-factor as needed. You're not giving Google access to anything by doing this. You're giving the user access. And if you're a partner with Microsoft, it's exactly the same. All of you that have deployed Office 365 or Azure or ADFS or any of the other acronyms that are there, they all support that single sign-on. We do that as a proxy, an identity-aware proxy. So that crusty old Rockwell HMI that you have that runs VNC on port 5900 with no password, you know who you are. We can make that a seamless browser-based single sign-on experience with multi-factor. So somebody who is literally on the side of the road can pull out a tablet and be connected to that power management system or whatever, boom, but only that one. And only read only if you want or whatever you need. We don't replace your identity system. Everybody you work with, directly or indirectly, they have an identity. Let's keep that alone. That way, when they get fired, they're getting taken out by their HR team. But now what you really need to own, it's fine to say, okay, fine, I'm willing to let my manufacturing partners, my vendors, manage their users, but there's no way I would give up control of who can do what. That's right. You need to own authorization. So that it's identity, authorization, access, those three, the who, the what, the how. You need to own the what. What are you allowed to do? You're allowed to use VNC to HMI 9 in read-only mode Monday afternoon at 2 p.m. as long as you presented a multi-factor. Okay, that's a statement of authorization. It's a relatively complex one. But you could say anyone who's in the toner admins group is able to check the printer toners or whatever you want to do. You need that very fine-grained authorization as a central layer. You can't go and implement it in the edge in all the applications. That HMI, it doesn't really understand the concept of users and permissions. It's kind of a Boolean on-off thing. It's meant for the idea of if you can touch it, it works. The network is sort of an afterthought. You need to own this in the middle layer. And that's really what we've made simple. Simple web interface, open Agilicus, say, hey, here's a group. These group users can do this, add new people, go into that group. And then the last one is that seamless access. You don't want the user having to bring up a VPN. They might have overlapping subnets. They might have multiple partners they're trying to work with at the same time that doesn't work. They may not be able to install your VPN. They might not have a license for it. It might not work on their hardware. Their network might be behind a very restricted firewall. It might be using a cellular or satellite, Starlink. It might have an inbound IP. You might use a private APN, whatever it is. We have a tiny bit of software that runs there. It creates an outbound connection, secured WebSocket, strongly encrypted, parks it on our cloud. Users come back in, end-to-end encrypted, figure out the magic, who's allowed to do what. From the end user's perspective, it's magic. I parked the car, I pulled out the tablet, I clicked on the button called HMI 9. HMI 9 arrived on the screen. I was able to fix the issue that I needed to fix for them. They were back in service within 2 minutes. I used single sign-on and multi-factor. They got an audit trail. I didn't have to bring up a VPN. I didn't have to tether anything. It just worked. That's where I say it can be positive sum. Everybody wins. That's that seamless access component. So what does it look like in action? That whole flow. Well, imagine this use case. I was going to do a demo today, but I'm a little busy and I'm a little lazy. And if you want to see a demo, reach out. My team will do a fantastic demo for you. We have a couple of videos online that show them, but there's nothing like a live demo for that magic, the drama and the unveil and the curtain and all that. So imagine you had a corporate generator powering your office. And there's no way you're going to put this on the public internet. You're not giving them a public IP. You're not doing port forwarding through your firewall because, who knows what the security stack of that crusty thing is. And you don't really want it on your corporate network either because, well, the corporate network's where all the good stuff is. But you've got this contract with the generator company that they have to be able to monitor it all the time because, it might be Christmas morning and you don't want this refrigerated product that you manufacture to spoil and, yada, yada, yada. So, and it must be instantly available in emergency. You don't really want to have, somebody go to the plant and plug the Ethernet jack in. Think of that use case. If the vendor needs access to this type of thing, but only this type of thing, it's kind of a pain in the ass to try to segment your network around every single use case like this, and you still wouldn't really know what's going on. This is what our system is really good at, is servicing this kind of need, building management, PLC, HMI, things of that nature. So in this case, here's all you would do. We have this tiny piece of software, the connector. It runs nearly on anything, pfSense, Linux, Windows, Ubiquiti, MikroTik, Raspberry Pi. A lot of people love those little ARM-based devices because they're economical and they're powerful and they get the job done. But it doesn't really matter. And you just need to have one of these that's near the generator. It could be the switch the generator is connected to, it might run it. And the user, that end user, they're going to sign in via the web with their corporate single sign-on, just like they're signing in for their email. They're going to see an icon called the generator. They click it. It's going to bounce to Azure. They're going to sign in with Azure. They're going to come back, just like their email. And they probably aren't going to be requested for a password because they already have the cached credentials live in the browser. You might choose to force multi-factor either every time or once a week on a new device, etc. The user now has access to the generator. We got rid of the rigmarole of how to get connected and how to authenticate, which the user saw as waste in their day. Every minute spent doing that is a wasted minute. So get rid of that and there's less waste. The user is now able to use that generator just like they were sitting beside it. But they don't have layer 2 or layer 3 IP connectivity or anything else. They can't accidentally or purposely go sideways from that generator into your ERP system and order themselves some new stuff. There's no new routes or IP installed. They haven't changed the routing, so their YouTube and their Netflix and their video conference are going to keep going direct to the internet. It's not like when your VPN's up and all that stuff breaks. It's perfect. They can have multiple customers active at the same time. They just have to keep different browser tabs open, and you have a perfect audit trail. You know who did what when in case there's ever a discussion. I think you weren't monitoring my generator last week when it failed. No, I was monitoring every day. Well, the audit log says you weren't. Or I think you logged in and you changed my voltage to 240 from 120. No, I didn't. Well, look at this. Not that that would happen. Generators wouldn't do that. Why is this security stuff important? Well, your business is important to you. Somebody else is going to find a way to make money out of it if you don't protect it. You've got NIST 882, which is now mandating a zero trust architecture for industrial. You've got ISA, IEC 62443, what they call zones and conduits. It's effectively a type of zero trust. You see a lot of these sort of governmental executive orders, CISA, Executive Order 14028, anything that's critical infrastructure, which is, a little bit broad, food production and energy production, things that are systematically important to our life that aren't necessarily government owned. It's covered in this category. And every one of them is mandating zero trust. Again, this doesn't have to be a project that you go to RFP and spend 3 years deciding and rip and replace your network. You could be doing it this afternoon, just like that person with that generator did. You can step into it. You can do a little bit at a time and just add more and more vendors and more devices. And it's really simple. So what was the outcome for that customer? With zero trust, they've reduced the risk of ransomware. They've eliminated shared credentials, big risk factors here. It's implemented instantly. Once that connector is installed, it's just boom, it's there. You can just, any person in the world with an email address, you can turn them on like that and turn them off like that. So, the generator vendor calls you and says, my developer needs access. Yours is the only one in the world doing this. Do you mind granting it? And you're like, okay, I guess I agree with that. Boom, that person's in. There isn't okay, start writing down a password. Okay, we're going to share my multi-factor. True story. Back in my history, I worked with a telecom, and the telecom used multi-factor. And it was a bit of a drive. It was an hour and a half drive. And the guy did me a solid. So periodically, he'd log me into their VPN, and he'd just read me the multi-factor code. He knows who he is. I've never told anybody his name, and I'm not going to, because it was a big favor. But we both know we did the wrong thing those days. You really want to avoid downtime by allowing users and third parties to access critical systems securely. You don't want downtime by accessing it insecurely and causing something bad to occur. This is the outcome you're going to get. So that's the value. The security goes up, the cost goes down. efficiency is better, end users are happier, less complaining. You know what's not to love? It's positive sum. Security has made your job better, and you're still effectively air gapped, but you're even better air gapped because things are in their own pools of air gap, and you can control those pools very fine grained. So with that, if you have any questions, feel free to email the company, info@agilicus.com. Check out our website. We got some white papers, we got some case studies, and just challenge me. If you think I'm wrong, email me, don@agilicus.com, and say, hey, show me how to make that work on that Allen Bradley HMI. I don't think you can. I'm like, all right, let's give it a go. You think that I got something wrong here, and maybe it's a little bit off story, but more importantly, would you like to try that demo that I was too lazy to put in here? We can do that live demo for you, or you can just click on the sign up button on our website and you can give it a try yourself. And it's all self-paced. You don't want to talk to a human being like me and you just want to give it a try, give it a go. Thanks very much. And again, the company was Agilicus, where we allow any user to access any resource from any device, from anywhere, with no VPN, simple, seamless access, zero trust. Just let's do it together. Cheers. Bye-bye.